I was 5 days away from turning 70. My daughter Kelly had been planning a small party at the church fellowship hall, and I had just finished going through some old albums for a memory table she wanted to set up. That's when I found it. The photo. Before we continue, please subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The truth behind Tom's disappearance is only beginning to unfold. It was buried inside a dusty brown envelope at the bottom of my cedar chest, wrapped in an old handkerchief that had belonged to Tom, my husband. The same Tom who died in Vietnam in 1972. The government sent a letter. They sent the folded flag. I even kissed his empty coffin before they lowered it into the ground. There was no body. Just remains. But the photo in my hands was dated May 2023. Just 2 years ago. And it was him. Same crooked smile. Same blue-gray eyes. He was sitting at an outdoor cafe with a bowl of noodles, wearing a plain button-down shirt. The photo looked like it was taken on a phone. Clear, sharp. There was Thai writing in the background. I turned the photo over. In neat handwriting it read, Chiang Mai, Thailand. Taken by Bao. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It made no sense. Tom was dead. Dead for 50 years. He wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. The photo sat on my nightstand, glowing like a ghost in the moonlight. I stared at it over and over again. Could it be some mistake? A man who just looked like him? But I knew my husband's face. I kissed that face every day for 5 years before he left me for war. And even after all this time I would have recognized him anywhere. The thing that chilled me the most? He didn't look 70. He looked older, worn down like life had been hard on him. But not dead. Not ashes in a box like the military had claimed. By sunrise I'd convinced myself I was losing my mind. Until I saw the second envelope. It was hidden behind a family Bible, wrapped in a yellowing bandana. Inside were 3 more photos. All recent. All clearly taken in Southeast Asia. 2 of them had Tom in them again. Once on a small fishing boat, once standing with a woman and child. The third was of a street with signs in Thai script with a note. Mae Rim District, his usual spot. No explanation. No letter. Just those images, and more confusion than I'd ever felt in my life. I took the photos to the kitchen, laid them out under the light. I made coffee with shaky hands and I just stared. I was alone in that house. Been a widow for 50 years. Everyone had moved on. I had moved on. I'd cried the tears, buried the dreams, folded the memories away like the uniforms still stored in Tom's trunk. But now everything was different. Was this a joke? A cruel prank? Or something darker? My mind went places I didn't want it to go. Why would someone fake their death in Vietnam? How could they? That war was chaos. Records were messy. Plenty of soldiers went missing. But Tom was listed as killed in action. They told me his unit had been ambushed near the Laotian border. They said there was strong evidence of his death, even if they never found the body. But now I was holding evidence of something else. And the worst part? A little voice inside me whispered, what if he left on purpose? I called Kelly. She picked up on the 3rd ring, cheerful as ever. Hey mama. You up early? Kelly, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to talk to you. Something serious. There was a pause. Hey. What's going on? I found some pictures of your father. But they're recent. Taken just a couple years ago. Silence. Mom. Daddy's been gone for 5 decades. What are you talking about? I need you to come over. Please. Don't bring the kids. He came in an hour. When I showed her the photos, her face drained of all color. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she whispered, where did these come from? I don't know, I told her. They were buried in the chest. And this second envelope was behind the Bible. Kelly touched the photo like it might burn her. That's him, she said quietly. It is him. We sat there, 2 grown women in a small Texas kitchen, both shaking like leaves. Neither of us said the obvious thing out loud. Why didn't he come back? Later that night after Kelly left, I locked all the doors. It wasn't something I usually did, but I suddenly felt exposed. Like someone had been in my house, leaving things I wasn't supposed to find. Maybe it was Tom himself. Was he trying to reach me? Or trying to warn me? I couldn't sleep again. I stayed up searching online, reading old military reports, watching documentaries about soldiers who had disappeared in Vietnam and reappeared decades later. Most of them had PTSD. Some were prisoners. Some just didn't want to come home. A few even started new lives in Laos, Cambodia, or Thailand. I thought of the photo with the woman and child. Could he have had a second family? Did they know about me? The idea made my stomach turn. Then a new, scarier thought came. What if he's in danger? What if someone found out he faked his death and now he's on the run? I stood at my window and looked out over the quiet neighborhood. My birthday was coming up. My family was planning a party. But I couldn't think about cake or decorations. All I could think was, Tom is alive. He never really died. And he's out there somewhere. Watching. Hiding. Maybe even waiting. I didn't go to church that Sunday. Instead, I printed the photos and took them to a local print shop so I could enlarge the clearest one of Tom. I had it blown up to 8 by 10. I needed to see him, really see him. Not as a tiny ghost in a wallet-sized picture, but as a full man sitting in daylight, alive and breathing. It made everything feel more real. Kelly called 3 times that day asking if I'd slept on it, as if this whole thing was some passing dream. I hadn't. I was wide awake. For the first time in years I felt something again. Not happiness. Not sadness. But something like urgency. That afternoon I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my old laptop. It took nearly 5 minutes just to load the browser. I didn't care. I typed in, flights to Chiang Mai, Thailand. Round-trip tickets were expensive. Too expensive for someone living off Social Security and a small teacher's pension. But I bought one anyway. Departure. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, Tuesday morning. Return, open-ended. I didn't choose a date. When Kelly came over the next day with a birthday balloon and a tray of cupcakes, I told her straight. I'm flying to Thailand. She stared at me like I'd said I was flying to the moon. You can't be serious. I am. Mama, you're 70. You've never even left the country. You don't speak Thai. You don't even drive at night anymore. I just looked at her. He's alive, Kelly. You saw the photos. If I die without knowing the truth, I'll regret it forever. She sat down slowly, shaking her head. And what if he really is alive? What if he doesn't want to be found? Then I'll know, I said. And I'll come home. She didn't cry. Not then. He just took my hand and squeezed it. Packing was strange. I hadn't bought a suitcase in 20 years. I borrowed one from my neighbor, Doris, who thought I was just going on a late-in-life vacation. I didn't tell her the real reason. I didn't tell anyone but Kelly. I packed light. A few blouses, a long skirt, my Bible, and a folder with the photos, printed maps, and a notepad. I added Tom's dog tags, which I'd kept in my jewelry box all these years. And his last letter, dated March 1972, written just 2 weeks before the army said he died. In it he'd written, if anything ever happens, know that I always loved you. Always. It made my throat close. The flight was over 20 hours with a layover in Tokyo. I'd never sat in one place for so long in my life. The plane was full of strangers. Young couples. Businessmen. A few backpackers with tan skin and tattoos. I felt old and out of place, but I didn't care. I stared out the window most of the time, wondering what I would say if I found him. Why didn't you come back? Did you think I wouldn't wait for you? When we landed in Chiang Mai, the heat hit me like a wave. It was sticky and loud and alive in a way Texas wasn't. The air smelled like spices and smoke. Tuk-tuks zipped by the airport entrance. People spoke quickly in a language I didn't understand. For a moment, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But then I reached into my purse and felt the photo again. That same cafe. That same background. He had to be here. I took a taxi into the city and checked into a small guest house run by an older Thai woman named Molly. She spoke decent English and smiled when I showed her the photo. This man, I said. Do you know this place? She squinted at it. Yes. That's Wat Ket area. Not far. Near river. Do you recognize him? She looked again, then shook her head slowly. No, but many Farang live here long time. You ask at cafe. I will, I said. That night I didn't sleep much. Jet lag, nerves, whatever you want to call it. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing his face. That smile. That face I'd kissed goodbye at the bus station in 1972. Back when I was still 22 and naive and thought the world made sense. The next morning I dressed carefully, picked the blouse he always liked, the soft blue one, and tucked the photo into my purse. Molly circled the cafe's location on a printed map. I walked. Fully. Heart pounding with every step. The cafe was real. It looked exactly like in the photo. Open air with bamboo chairs and red umbrellas. A sleepy orange cat lounged near the steps. I walked in and stood there, clutching my purse like a child on the first day of school. A young man greeted me in Thai. I shook my head and showed him the photo. Have you seen this man? He looked at it for a long moment. Then something changed in his eyes. Mr. Tom, he said. Yes. He come here. Many year. Sit there. He pointed to the same table from the photo. Is he still here? In town? The man hesitated. Then nodded. Maybe. Sometime go north. Fishing village. May Rim. I tried to keep my voice calm. Do you know where I can find him? He reached under the counter and scribbled an address on a napkin. Maybe here. Small place. Tell driver, May Rim Road. I clutched that napkin like it was the most precious thing in the world. Back at the guest house I stared at the address for hours. I had what I needed. A direction. A lead. After 50 years of thinking he was buried in a cold plot under a marble stone, I was close. So close I could feel it in my chest. And yet I hesitated. What if I found him and he looked at me like a stranger? What if he denied everything? What if he didn't want me? That thought almost broke me. But then I remembered the last line of his letter. I always loved you. I circled the address on the map and laid out my clothes for the next day. I wrote a note for Kelly in case something happened to me. And I set an alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow I would find him. Or I would finally let him go. But either way I would know. I barely slept. When the alarm went off at 6 a.m., I was already wide awake, sitting on the edge of the bed in my long cotton nightgown, clutching my husband's photo like it might vanish. I had folded and unfolded that napkin with the address on it so many times, the ink was starting to smear. I dressed carefully, my cleanest slacks, a modest blouse and comfortable shoes. I wore the locket Tom gave me when we first got married. I hadn't worn it in years, but somehow it felt right today. I slipped Tom's old dog tags into my purse, along with the photo and my notepad. The air outside was still cool when I stepped into the tuk-tuk Molly had arranged for me. The driver didn't say much, just nodded and pulled away from the guest house. The streets were waking up, vendors setting up, scooters buzzing by, monks walking barefoot in orange robes. I watched it all pass in a blur. May Rim was about 30 minutes away, nestled in the hills outside the city. The tuk-tuk slowed as we entered a quieter area, greener, more peaceful. Fewer buildings. More trees. Then we stopped. The driver pointed ahead at a small wooden house with faded white shutters. It sat behind a rusty gate, surrounded by a garden that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. It wasn't fancy, but it looked lived in. I paid him, thanked him, and slowly stepped out. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Just as I was about to turn away, the door creaked open from the inside. And there he was. Older. Thinner. Tanned from the sun. But it was him. Tom. My Tom. The man I married in 1969. The man they said died in Vietnam in 1972. The man whose name was carved into a marble headstone in Arlington. He stood in the doorway in a white undershirt and linen pants, barefoot. His gray hair was combed back and his eyes, those same gray-blue eyes, locked onto mine. He didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. We just stood there frozen in time. Finally I whispered, "Tom?" His mouth parted slightly. "Mary." My knees almost buckled. We sat in silence for a long while on a bench under the shade of a mango tree in his backyard. He brought out 2 glasses of cold water. I couldn't stop staring at his hands. Older, veined, but still the same hands I used to hold during church service back home. "You're really here," he said finally. "You're really alive," I said. He nodded. "I guess you want to know everything." "I do." So he told me. He hadn't died in Vietnam. Not really. His unit was ambushed in the jungle. There was chaos. Fire. Screaming. A helicopter crashed nearby. He got separated from his group, injured, left for dead. When he came to, he was alone and disoriented. He wandered for days, surviving off the land. Eventually, he was taken in by a group of villagers who helped him recover. But by the time he tried to make contact, the army had already declared him killed in action. His body had been found, though it was never positively identified. A mix-up. A burned body. Dog tags swapped. The military never questioned it. "But you could have come home," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "You could have told me. You could have written something." He looked down at his hands. "I tried." He reached into a wooden chest beside the bench and pulled out a stack of yellowed letters. Unmailed, unopened. Dozens of them. "I wrote to you every month for the first 5 years. But I didn't know where to send them. And after a while, I didn't think I deserved to. I felt my heart rip open." "You didn't think you deserved to come home to me?" I asked. "After everything?" He finally looked at me. "I saw things over there, Mary. Did things I don't talk about. When I realized they thought I was dead, I felt like maybe that was a second chance. I wasn't the man you married anymore." He paused. "I didn't want you to see what I'd become. I wanted to scream. To hit him. To hold him. I didn't know what to feel. 50 years. 50 years of grieving a man who wasn't dead. 50 years of holidays alone. Birthdays. Anniversaries. Watching friends grow old together while I sat with a folded flag and fading memories. And he'd been here. Alive. "I came here to find the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "And I found it. But you let me believe you were dead. You let me bury you." He didn't argue. Just nodded. "I know," he whispered. We sat in silence again. Only the sound of birds chirping and wind rustling through the trees. He stood slowly and walked inside, returning with one of the letters. It was dated 1977. My name was written neatly on the front. He handed it to me. "I never stopped loving you," he said. "Even when I tried to forget you." I took the letter but didn't open it. Not yet. I didn't trust my hands to be steady. I stood up. "I need time," I said. "Of course. I'm not sure what happens next." "Neither am I," he replied. I walked back down the gravel road, the unmailed letter in my purse and tears in my eyes. I had gotten what I came for. The truth. But now I had to face something even harder. What do you do when the person you've mourned for 50 years suddenly comes back? And what do you say to the ghost who let you cry at his grave while he built a new life halfway around the world? I didn't sleep that night either. Back at the guest house, I sat on the little balcony overlooking the street, clutching the unopened letter Tom gave me. It was nearly 50 years old, yellowed at the corners, sealed but slightly brittle. The kind of envelope that feels like it'll turn to dust if you breathe too hard. I couldn't bring myself to open it right away. I needed to understand the person who wrote it. So instead I reached for my journal. The same one I started keeping the day the military called me in 1972 to tell me Tom was gone. And slowly, painfully I started writing again. Back then I was 21 and freshly married. Tom and I had just moved into a tiny 2-bedroom house on Oak Lane in our little Texas town. He was lean, tan, always smiling and full of energy. I loved how he held my hand even when we were just walking to the mailbox. We were only married 8 months when his draft notice came. "I'll be back before Christmas," he said that day, kissing my forehead as if nothing bad could ever touch us. But he didn't come back. In July of 1972, 2 uniformed men came to the door. My legs gave out before they said a word. They told me Tom's helicopter had been shot down in Quang Tri. There was a fire. The remains were unidentifiable, but they were reasonably sure. His tags had been found nearby. I begged them to double-check. I asked for pictures. For anything. But all they gave me was a folded flag, a few medals, and the deep, permanent silence that comes when a heart breaks too loudly. I kept waiting for him to walk back through that door. For months, I didn't move his boots from the hallway. I kept his toothbrush on the sink. His jacket stayed draped over the couch like he might pick it up on the way to work. My parents worried I was losing it. Maybe I was. After a year, I finally accepted it. I had to. My hands trembled when I signed the paperwork confirming I was his widow. His name was carved into a white stone at Arlington National Cemetery. I visited that grave every year on his birthday. Every year on our anniversary. And every year I whispered the same thing. If you're out there, come home. I never remarried. Not because no one tried. There was Pastor Jim, who lost his wife in '78 and brought me flowers every Sunday. There was George from the hardware store, who asked me to dinner 3 times before I said no for good. But I never could shake the feeling that Tom was still mine, even in death. I worked as a librarian, taught Sunday school, helped raise my niece when her mom passed. But deep down, my life stopped moving the day I lost him. And now he was alive. He'd spent 5 decades in a quiet corner of Thailand while I cried over his headstone in Arlington. While I sat alone on Christmas mornings. While I planned his memorial. And he had been writing letters. But never sending them. Was it guilt? Fear? Cowardice? I didn't know. But sitting on that balcony with the streetlights glowing below and the hum of scooters fading into the night, I finally opened the envelope. The letter was dated August 3, 1977. Dear Mary, I don't even know if you'll ever read this. I found out last year they think I'm dead. That you buried me. That there's a grave with my name on it. I swear I didn't mean for this to happen. At first I was just trying to survive. I was scared, broken, lost in a country I didn't understand. The man I was died out there, even if my body didn't. I wanted to come home. I wrote the embassy. Tried to reach the army. But no one listened. They thought I was confused or lying or crazy. Maybe I was. And then one day, I just stopped trying. I don't deserve you waiting for me. I know that. But I hope you're happy. I hope you moved on. And if you didn't, if some part of you still remembers me, I hope you know I never stopped loving you. I keep writing these letters because it's the only way I feel like I'm still part of your world. Even if you never read a word. Forever yours, Tom. I cried harder than I've cried in years. Not just for the pain, but for the lost time. For the birthdays missed. For the kisses not shared. For every letter that stayed trapped in that wooden chest under his mango tree. He hadn't stopped loving me. He just stopped believing he deserved to be loved. The next morning I went back to his house. He was sitting in a rocking chair on the porch, sipping tea and looking like he expected me. I read it, I said. He nodded. I was angry, I added. Still am. You have every right to be, he replied. But I also remember who you were. Who we were. He looked at me, really looked, and said, that's all I've been hoping for. We talked for hours. About what he saw in the war, about the monks who took him in, about how he built a small life teaching English at a local school and helping veterans in the area. He never married. Never had kids. He lived alone. He never forgot me. I just didn't think I had the right to bring my wreckage home, he said. You were my wreckage, I said quietly. You were all I had. By sunset I realized something. This wasn't just a story about a man who faked his death. This was about a man who was dead in every way that mattered. Until I showed up. And I wasn't sure what scared me more. That I still loved him. Or that I might have to decide what to do with that love now. When I stepped off the plane back in Texas, everything felt smaller. The air was drier. The sky wider. Even the streets looked like toy roads compared to Thailand's twisting alleys. I clutched my handbag like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Inside it was Tom's letter. I hadn't let it go since I left him sitting on that porch, waving at me with tears in his eyes. I didn't know how to explain any of it. Not to my friends. Not to my sister. And especially not to the people in town who still put flowers on Tom's headstone every year. I'd only been back for 2 days when I got invited to the Veterans Day parade. Pastor Jim had called me personally. Mary, we're honoring Tom this year. A special tribute. You'll be our guest of honor. Hope you'll come. I nearly dropped the phone. Of course they were. He was a war hero. A symbol of sacrifice. A name read every November over the loudspeaker. Arlington grave. Military honors. Folded flag. But Tom was alive. Breathing. Still drinking lemongrass tea under a mango tree halfway across the world. And they didn't know. I didn't have the heart to tell them. Not yet. Not over the phone. Not without seeing their faces. So I said yes. I put on my best navy blue dress. I wore the pearl earrings Tom gave me before he shipped out in '71. And I walked straight into town square with a heart pounding so loud I thought the marching band might stop and turn around. The crowd was already gathered when I got there. Kids holding tiny flags. Old veterans in lawn chairs. High schoolers in band uniforms wiping sweat from their brows. Everyone smiled at me. Everyone meant well. And I wanted to scream. The mayor went up to the podium and tapped the microphone. This year we're honoring the memory of Specialist Thomas G. Whitaker. A hometown boy. A soldier who gave his life in Vietnam. And a man who, though gone, left a lasting legacy on all of us. My knees wobbled. His wife Mary is with us today. A symbol of strength. Of love. Of remembrance. Then the mayor looked directly at me and said, "Mary, would you like to say a few words?" There was the moment. I could lie. Say a soft thank you and sit back down. Or I could ruin everything they believed. Everything they'd built around his memory. I stepped up to the mic. "Thank you," I began, voice trembling. "I appreciate your kind words." The crowd went quiet. I glanced at the folded program in my hand. There was Tom's picture. Young, handsome in uniform. The same face that smiled at me from across a porch just days ago. "I need to tell you something," I said. A whisper rustled through the rows. "Tom is not dead." Silence. Total silence. He survived the crash. He was injured. Stranded. Thought he'd never make it home. But he's alive. Someone in the back let out a gasp. "I found him. I saw him. In Thailand. Just last week." People started murmuring. Some stood. Others looked confused. A few covered their mouths. The mayor leaned in, unsure if this was a breakdown, a joke, or a miracle. "I know it sounds impossible," I added. "I thought I'd lost him too. For 50 years. But he's been out there, writing letters he never sent, holding on to hope the world forgot him." Then came the real blow. "I think I'm going back." Someone finally spoke. "Back? To Thailand?" I nodded. "He needs me. And I think I need him." A woman in the front row stood up. "Mrs. Brenner. Tom's high school teacher. You're saying we've mourned him all these years, and he's just been alive this whole time?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." Someone else shouted, "Why didn't he come back?" And that's when the judgment started. Voices rose. Words flew like arrows. "He abandoned his country. He left you. He let us bury him. What kind of man fakes his death?" The shame stung. I hadn't prepared for this part. I'd pictured tears, hugs, maybe even joy. Not fury. Not betrayal from people who'd never even known him personally. "I understand you're angry," I said. "I was too. But you didn't see what I saw. He's not the man who left in 1971. He's been through things we can't even begin to imagine." Someone scoffed. "So now he gets to just come back and pretend nothing happened?" "No," I said. "But maybe he deserves a second chance." Afterward, people avoided me. At the diner, folks stopped talking when I walked in. At church, I caught side glances and pity stares. Even my sister Ruth didn't know what to say when I called her. "You sure this isn't just grief playing tricks?" she asked. "A scam? Some man pretending to be Tom?" "I'd know him in the dark," I whispered. "It's him, Ruth. I swear it's him." She went quiet. "Then I guess you have a choice to make." That night I sat on my porch looking out at the stars like I used to when Tom first left for Vietnam. I remembered sitting here with a blanket over my knees, wondering if he was alive. And now I knew. But it came at a price. The town that once stood beside me now saw me as the woman who shattered their perfect story. The widow who wouldn't stay buried with her husband's memory. And maybe they were right to be hurt. Because I was about to leave again. Not just behind a house, but a life. A history. So I kept thinking of Tom's letter. I never stopped loving you. And I realized I hadn't stopped either. Even after 50 years. Even after death. The next morning I booked my ticket back to Thailand. One way. We're halfway through. What happens when Mary chooses love over legacy? Don't miss the next part. Subscribe now and stay with us to witness the reunion of a lifetime. I arrived back in Thailand 3 days later. The moment I stepped off the plane, the thick, humid air hit me like a wall. It felt like walking straight into Tom's memory again. A memory that was no longer just a ghost. It was a living, breathing man waiting for me. The taxi ride to Chiang Mai was quiet. I kept replaying the look on his face when I first showed up weeks ago. The way his hands trembled when he reached for mine. It was all so real. And terrifying. Because this time I wasn't coming for a visit. I was coming home. Or so I thought. When I arrived at the bungalow, I noticed something was off. The front door was open. A cup of tea sat untouched on the porch table, its steam long gone. And Tom's old dog Duke was pacing in circles, barking. Not the lazy, happy bark I remembered, but a sharp, frantic sound. Tom. I called out. No answer. I stepped inside. The place looked the same, calm, simple, worn in like a favorite shirt. But then I saw it. Tom was on the floor. Face twisted. One side of his body limp. His lips moved but no sound came out. My heart dropped. I rushed to him, falling to my knees. Tom. Tom, can you hear me? His eyes were open, darting around, panicked. He was trying to say something, but it was just garbled noise. His right hand barely twitched, reaching for mine. I grabbed his phone and called the emergency number from the magnet on the fridge. The paramedics came fast. Too fast for a country known for slow mornings. I rode in the back of the ambulance holding Tom's good hand, whispering to him through tears. You're gonna be okay. You have to be okay. The hospital was small but clean. Doctors rushed him into a room and shut the doors. Nurses tried to talk to me, but I couldn't understand everything. My Thai was bad. I kept repeating his name. Thomas Whitaker. Stroke. Please help him. Hours passed. I sat in a plastic chair under a flickering light, staring at the linoleum floor. Everything blurred. Felt like I was back in Texas waiting for the phone call that never came. Only this time I'd seen it happen with my own eyes. A doctor finally came out. Miss Mary. I stood dizzy. He had a severe stroke. The left side of his brain. Damaged. Speech mobility. We stabilized him. But what? I asked, barely breathing. He may never speak clearly again. Movement on the right side, very limited. We need to keep him here. I nodded, holding in a sob. When they let me into his room, Tom looked at me with the same eyes from 50 years ago. Only now they were scared. He tried to smile, but it came out crooked. He tried to speak, but only managed a whisper of sound. I sat beside him and held his hand. It's okay, I said softly. You don't have to say anything. He pointed to a notebook on the side table. I opened it. There, written in messy, shaking letters, was one word. Sorry. That night, I curled up in the hospital chair beside him and wept quietly. All I could think about was how fragile everything had become. We just found each other. After 50 years. And now fate had slammed us with another blow. Was this punishment? Had I abandoned everything for a man who would now be trapped in a bed for the rest of his life? A week ago I had a community. A porch. A quiet town that mourned Tom like a hero. Now I had a hospital room with peeling paint and a man whose body had betrayed him. And still I never once thought of leaving. Over the next few days I became his shadow. I fed him. Helped the nurses turn him. I learned a few key Thai phrases and taught some English back in return. Every time Tom looked at me, I saw guilt in his eyes. He was angry at his body. At time. At the war. At the choice he made to disappear. But I wasn't angry anymore. One night I leaned over and said, I didn't come back for the strong young soldier. I came back for you, this you. He blinked slowly. Then his left hand reached up and touched my cheek. A tiny moment. But the most powerful one we'd had since I returned. By the third week, the doctors started physical therapy. He couldn't walk. Could barely sit up on his own. But he tried. Oh, he tried so hard. Every little success, a squeeze of my hand, a raised spoon, a soft vowel sound, was a victory. The nurses began calling us the old lovebirds. They didn't know our story, but they could feel it. One day I brought the photo album I'd carried from Texas. I laid it on his bed page by page. Our wedding. My birthday cake from 1970. He pointed at one picture. Me on the porch in a floral dress. Then he mouthed the word, beautiful. But as much as we grew closer, I couldn't ignore the voice in the back of my head. What now? Would we live in this hospital? Would I become a full-time nurse? Would he recover enough to leave? To walk again? To speak fully? There were no answers. Just silence and effort. One afternoon while feeding him soup, he gripped my wrist tight. Looked at me with eyes full of fire. And slowly mouthed, "Take me home." "Where?" I whispered. "Texas." He blinked. "No," he mouthed again. Then tapped the edge of his bed. "Our home." And that's when I knew. It didn't matter where we were. Texas, Thailand, anywhere in between. Home wasn't a porch or a flagpole. It was sitting beside him through the worst and the best. It was holding on to 50 years of memory, and not running when things got hard. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Oh, let's build it right here." But deep down, I wondered how long we had. And if love alone would be enough to carry us through what was coming next. The first time he walked again, it was just 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. And then he collapsed into my arms, shaking, sweating, crying harder than I'd ever seen. It was 4 weeks since the stroke. We had settled into a small assisted living cottage just outside Chiang Mai. Not a hospital anymore, but not home either. Somewhere in between. A place with handrails and oxygen tanks, where people smiled too wide and whispered too much. Tom hated it. But every day he fought like hell to earn back pieces of his body, and pieces of his dignity. We had a small porch now. Not like the one in Texas with the white railing and roses, but it had charm. Tom would sit there each evening, a blanket across his legs, and I'd read to him. Old letters. Newspaper clippings. Bits of our past I'd tucked away. One night he squeezed my hand as I closed a letter from his mother. "Thank you," he mouthed. I smiled. "We're just getting started." But even in that quiet I could feel the storm coming. There was still so much I didn't know. Still so much he hadn't told me. And fate wasn't finished with us yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the knock came. I was inside folding laundry, listening to soft piano music playing from the neighbor's window. Tom was asleep in the sun. I wiped my hands and opened the door and froze. A young man stood there. Early 30s. Deep brown eyes. And a familiar tilt to his chin that hit me like a slap. "Can I help you?" I asked. He looked past me and saw Tom through the porch window. His jaw clenched. "My name's James Whitaker," he said. "I think he's my father." I stumbled back a step. "What did you say?" He pulled out a crumpled photo from his pocket. Held it out with shaky hands. It was Tom. From maybe 20 years ago. Holding a baby. "I've been looking for him since I was a kid," James said. "My mom met him in Bangkok during the 90s. He told her he wasn't free. That he had a wife back in America. Then he disappeared." I stared at the photo. Same eyes. Same half-smile. Same hands that now barely held a spoon. I didn't know what to say. I'd come all this way for Tom. But now, someone else had too. James stepped onto the porch slowly, watching Tom sleep. "He looks older than I thought," he whispered. I nodded. "A stroke. 6 weeks ago." Tom stirred and opened his eyes. At first he looked at me. Then at the stranger. And I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not love, not pain, guilt. Real raw guilt. James knelt beside him. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly. Tom blinked. Then nodded once. "I'm your son," James said. "You left us." Tom tried to speak. Nothing came. His left hand reached for the notebook. I handed it to him. He scribbled one word, "Sorry." James read it. Then folded the paper and put it in his pocket. "I don't want your apology," he said. I just want the truth. That night, the three of us sat around a small table in silence. I made tea. Tom wrote slowly in the notebook. James read every word. About the war. About the fake death. About the lonely years. About the night he met James' mother at a veterans support group in Bangkok. About how he walked away from both families. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He had lied to me. Not just once in 1973, but again in the 1990s. And the worst part? He had another chance at love. At family. At redemption. And he ran again. I stood up and walked outside. The wind felt sharp. Like it was cutting through everything I thought was true. James came out a few minutes later. I didn't mean to cause problems, he said. No, I said. You didn't. You brought the truth. He couldn't. We sat on the steps together. He looked down at his hands. I used to dream he'd walk through my school doors. Just once. And now here he is. Old. Broken. I looked at him. He's still your father. He shook his head. Biology isn't the same as love. I nodded. But inside I knew I had to make a choice soon. Because Tom might not have much time left. And now the past wasn't just haunting us. It was sitting on our front porch. The next morning I woke to find James helping Tom with his leg exercises. Gently lifting. Counting aloud. And Tom was smiling. Not his usual half grin. But a real smile. A father seeing his son for the first time in daylight. Later that day James packed a bag. I work in Manila. I fly back tonight. I walked him to the car. He handed me the notebook. Inside was a new page. Written in Tom's shaky hand. Let him go if he wants. But tell him I never stopped wondering. James looked at me. He's not who I hoped he'd be. But maybe he can still be someone. Then he got in the car and drove away. That night I showed Tom the note. He cried quietly. Then wrote 3 words in my palm with his finger. Still. My son. And I knew what I had to do. This man. This complicated, broken, beautiful man. He might not deserve a second chance. But I wasn't here for what was deserved. I was here for what was left. And what we still had was love. Tom had been sleeping more. The doctor said it was normal. Post-stroke fatigue. Heart pressure. Emotional strain. But I knew better. He was fading. Every day a little further from me. And yet, something had shifted since James left. Tom seemed more at peace. He smiled more even when the words wouldn't come. He'd grip my hand and nod as if to say thank you for staying. But that peace didn't last. Not after I found the letter. The one I was never meant to see. It was early morning. Chiang Mai's clouds were low, hugging the hills, and the air smelled like jasmine and rain. I was organizing Tom's drawer, trying to find the blood pressure pills he always misplaced. That's when I saw it. A thick envelope tucked beneath his old army sweater. It was addressed to me. In his handwriting. But it wasn't sealed. Something in me paused. I shouldn't read it, I thought. But then again, maybe he left it there on purpose. My hands were trembling when I slid the letter out. I sat on the edge of the bed and unfolded the pages. The first line hit like a punch to the chest. If you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. The letter wasn't long. But it was heavy. He wrote about the war, things he'd never said before. About watching men die. About the smell of blood in the jungle. About being ordered to do things he could never undo. He wrote about faking his death, yes. But this time he gave the real reason. Not just fear. Not just cowardice. But betrayal. I overheard something that made me believe the army was going to cover up what happened in Quang Nai. That they'd pin it on me. I panicked. I didn't trust anyone, not even you. I stopped reading. My heart was pounding. I picked up again. I thought if I disappeared maybe you'd be safer. Maybe I'd protect you from the fallout. That was my logic then. Stupid, I know. But the truth is I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself. And I've spent every year since trying to live with that. He went on to write about the 90s. The woman he met. The brief affair. The child. I told myself I couldn't ruin your life again. That's why I didn't come back. That's why I didn't tell you about James. But it was selfish. I see that now. And then the final paragraph. Mary, if there's one thing I've never lied about, it's loving you. I loved you when we were 19. I loved you in 73 when I watched your hands fold our wedding photo before I left. I loved you every second of that first year in Thailand when I thought you'd show up and slap me in the face. And I love you now. Even if this stroke takes everything else, it can't take that. I sat there for a long time. Silent. The letter fell from my lap to the floor. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the porch where Tom sat in his chair, eyes closed, the morning sun brushing his face. I held the letter in my hand and stood there waiting. When he opened his eyes and saw it, his face went pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He tried to speak. Nothing came. So I knelt beside him and whispered, "All this time I thought I was healing you. But I think I was just avoiding the truth." He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. But I didn't hold back either. That afternoon we had visitors. Tom's old army friend, Calvin, flew in from California. I didn't know he was still alive. He had thick gray eyebrows and walked with a cane. When he saw Tom, he burst into tears. "I thought you were dead, you son of a gun," he said, laughing and crying at once. They couldn't talk much. Tom's speech was still failing, but their eyes said enough. Later that evening, Calvin pulled me aside. "There's something you should know," he said. I braced myself. He handed me a small folder. Inside were copies of government files. Declassified documents. Ones Tom had asked Calvin to dig up years ago. I flipped through them. Military statements. Reports from Quang Nai. And a memo. Top secret, Tao released. It confirmed something shocking. Tom wasn't paranoid. The military had planned to scapegoat someone for civilian casualties in a botched operation. And that someone was him. There it was, in black and white. Tom faked his death because they were going to destroy him. Not for desertion. But for something he didn't do. And he kept it hidden all these years to protect me from the truth. I walked back into the house with the folder in my hands. Tom looked at me from his chair. I sat beside him and whispered, "I believe you now." His eyes filled with tears. He pointed to his heart, then to mine, and I broke down crying. "I should have trusted you," I said. "But you should have trusted me too." That night I sat by his side. The fan hummed gently above us. His hand rested in mine. And I read the letter again, this time aloud. By the end both of us were crying. Because it wasn't just a letter. It was a confession. A farewell. A beginning, and an ending. But even as I closed the final page, I felt something new. Not just grief. But grace. For years I thought I was the widow of a dead soldier. Then I thought I was the wife of a liar. Well, I know I was always the love of a man who made one terrible decision in the middle of a terrible war, and paid for it the rest of his life. We all break in our own ways. But some of us come back. Even if it takes 47 years. Tom passed quietly. Just like he lived those last few months. With a slow, soft presence that filled every room he entered. He died in his sleep one Sunday morning just before sunrise. I'd woken up to birds outside and his hand still in mine, warm at first, but slowly losing that warmth. No gasping. No fear. Just stillness. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're safe now." Then I wept. Not just because I'd lost my husband, but because I'd found him again, and now had to let him go all over. Bringing his body back to the States wasn't easy. There were questions, paperwork, a flag that technically wasn't his anymore. He had no official death record in Vietnam because his first death was faked. No social security. No military status. He was a ghost to the system. But I didn't care. I knew who he was. And so did the people in Calico Ridge, Texas. The town we left behind in 1972. I hadn't set foot there in decades. The trees seemed shorter. The roads seemed smaller. But the pain, oh the pain, was still alive in the bricks of that old church where I once lit a candle every Sunday for a man I thought was dead. We buried him on the Whitaker family plot beside his parents. The funeral was modest. Just a simple wooden casket. No military honor guard. But a whole town turned out. Old classmates. The pastor who'd married us. Even my cousin Janet, who once swore she'd never speak to me again after I moved on too quickly. She hugged me and sobbed. And then came the cameras. It started with a whisper. Didn't Tom Whitaker die in Vietnam? Then someone pulled up the obituary from 1973. The death notice. The folded flag. The memorial plaque at the American Legion. Then someone snapped a photo of the casket going into the ground. Vietnam vet who faked death returns after 47 years. That's what the headline said on Monday morning. By Tuesday there were 3 reporters on my front porch. One of them shoved a mic in my face and asked, was he a coward or a hero? I slammed the door. But the questions didn't stop. The local news ran with it. Then the national ones picked it up. Tom's old unit name surfaced again. So did the declassified files. Now people weren't calling him a deserter. They were calling him a whistleblower. A scapegoat. A man who uncovered what the government tried to bury. Veterans started messaging me. Some angry. Some grateful. I wish my dad had done what he did, one woman wrote. He stayed and took the fall. He never came home. Others weren't so kind. He abandoned his country. Period. But one message caught my breath. It was from a woman in Thailand. Her name was Molly. She said she had something of Tom's. At first I didn't know what to think. Was it more fallout? More secrets? But then she sent a scanned document. A hand-drawn will. Tom's will. Not the one we signed here in Texas 50 years ago. A newer one. Signed 2 months before he passed. And my name was on it. But so was another. James. It said Tom left everything he had in Thailand to be split between my wife, Mary Whitaker, and my son, James. It wasn't much. An old motorbike, some land he never finished paying for, and a locked wooden box. He promised to send it. I waited 3 weeks. The package came by courier. It was heavy. Unassuming. Wrapped in brown paper. Inside the box were a few photos, medals, a journal, and a flash drive. Yes, a flash drive. Tom had finally learned to use a computer. With trembling hands I plugged it into my laptop. There were 3 video files. The first was dated just 6 days before he passed. Tom was sitting on the porch in Chiang Mai. He looked tired but peaceful. Hey sweetheart, he said, his voice slow but clear. If you're watching this, I'm probably not there anymore. But I didn't want to leave anything unsaid. I watched in silence as he spoke for 10 minutes. He talked about James. About regrets. About what it meant to see me again at 70. Some people get 1 lifetime of love. I got 2. And both were with you. By the end of the video I was shaking. The second file was addressed to James. I didn't watch it. That was his moment with his father. The third was simply labeled, Calico Ridge. Curious, I clicked. And there he was, Tom, standing on Main Street just months before I arrived in Thailand. Alone. No beard. No cane. Looking at the storefronts he once walked past as a boy. He turned the camera to himself and whispered, I never stopped loving this town. Even when I thought it hated me. But I understand now. It was me who couldn't forgive myself. The next day I drove to the town hall. I donated the contents of that box to the local museum. The curator cried when he saw the old medals. He said they'd set up a special display, the man who came back. Then he asked me, do you think people will forgive him? I answered, they don't have to. He forgave himself. And that was enough. As I stood in front of his grave that evening, I placed one last thing on the headstone. A photo. The one taken in Thailand, the one that started it all. Tom on his porch. Alive. Smiling. Free. And I whispered, you finally came home. But just as I turned to leave, I noticed a young man across the cemetery. James. He'd flown in. He didn't say a word. He just stood beside me. We watched the sun set together in silence. James and I stood side by side at Tom's grave. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over Calico Ridge Cemetery. For years, I'd wondered what it would be like to meet the man I never knew, my husband's son. Now he was here. The weight of all the years hung heavy between us. He was quiet. I was scared. Would this reunion heal the wounds Tom left behind? Or open new ones? I'm sorry, Mary, James said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was steady but soft. For everything. I swallowed hard. I don't even know where to start. He looked down at the ground and took a deep breath. You have every right to hate me, he said. But I want you to know, I never wanted to hurt you. James told me about his mother, Molly. How Tom met her after disappearing from the war. How they built a life together in Thailand. But Tom never forgot me. He wrote letters to Molly about me. He talked about coming back one day. He even tried to call me once in the late 90s, but I'd moved and changed my number. James showed me a crumpled letter Tom sent to Molly explaining everything. I was scared to tell you, Tom had written, because I didn't want to lose you or Mary. It was the kind of pain no woman should carry. To love a man who split his heart and his life in two. I looked at James. He was more like Tom than I expected. Same eyes. Same stubborn jaw. I reached out. He took my hand. And for the first time in decades I felt the possibility of peace. But then James dropped the bombshell. There was something else. Something Tom never told me. Before he died, Tom had made arrangements. He'd left instructions with Molly to reach out to me. But he also left a secret. The flash drive held more than videos. There were documents proving that Tom wasn't just a victim of war. He'd discovered a cover-up. A conspiracy that went higher than anyone knew. And he tried to expose it. Tom's death wasn't natural. The stroke, the fatigue, the silence, it wasn't just illness. It was poison. Slow. Deliberate. And the people responsible were still out there. James and I stared at each other, disbelief mixing with fear. We need to tell someone, he said. But who? That night I sat by Tom's old rocking chair. The one he used in Thailand. I traced my fingers over the worn wood. Remembering the man who loved me, who ran from me and who came back after 47 years. I thought about the war, the secrets, the betrayals. And I realized one thing. The real fight wasn't over yet. The next morning James and I went to the local sheriff. We handed over everything. Files, videos, letters. The sheriff listened, then promised to bring in the FBI. The investigation began. Suddenly our small town was at the center of a national story. Reporters showed up again. But this time I wasn't hiding. I told the truth. About Tom. About the war. About love that survived lies and time. Weeks later the FBI announced new leads. They were reopening cold cases connected to Tom's original investigation. And names that were once untouchable were now being questioned. James and I watched it all unfold on the evening news. The impossible was happening. Justice, for Tom, for the truth, was finally on the horizon. But the greatest surprise came when Molly flew in. She stood beside me at a press conference holding my hand. Two women, linked by one man's love and one war's shadow. Together we told the story that had haunted us all. Together we showed the world the cost of silence. In the end I learned that love is complicated. That war scars more than just the battlefield. That truth, no matter how late, is powerful. And that sometimes the people we think are gone are just waiting to come home. As I looked at James and Molly that night, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. For forgiveness. For healing. For the future. Thank you for staying with me on this journey. If Tom's story moved you, please like, comment, and share. Most importantly, subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us that even broken lives can find their way back to love.